Coming up on Network Africa, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says the current fight against terror in West Africa's Sahel region is insufficient, urges more support from donors. A gas tanker explosion injures 6 people in South Africa. Plus, the Algerian parliament elects Islamist opposition politician Slimane Chinain as its new speaker. Hello and a warm welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says the current fight against terror in West Africa's Sahel region is insufficient. He was speaking at a UN summit on counter-terrorism where he urged donors to do more to support military and developmental efforts to stop violent extremism. Recently, the Sahel has suffered an increase in jihadist and ethnic violence and sometimes a combination of both.
Unfortunately, G5 Sahel was formed with resources that are not entirely predictable and with a mandate that is weaker. And unfortunately, we are seeing that terrorism is progressing. It started in Mali, it went to Burkina Faso, Niger, and now when we speak with the presidents of Ghana, Benin, Togo, and Cote d'Ivoire, they see the terrorism coming to their borders. We should be open to initiatives that go beyond the G5 Sahel. I think now it will be important, and we are open to support any African initiative involving all the countries of a region in which the threat that is spreading feel concerned.
Let's get more on this story from security expert Temitope Oludu. Thanks for joining us on the program. 2 years after the G5 Sahel force was formed, it's barely functional and a lot of donors have failed to deliver promised funds. Why this indifference, you think, from the international community?
Unfortunately, politics that is going on in terms of, regional outbreak, in terms of how the regions are structured in Africa, that has always been the challenge for us, whether you're Francophone or you're Anglophone. And we know that these G5 have been in existence, since 16th of February 2014, when they've been trying their best to try and deal with the issue of terrorism within that particular region where they've been situated. And we know as a fact that the European Union actually promised some funds, in 2017 when they were looking at putting together a 10,000 force. But the United States and the UK actually blocked or were not in agreement with that move. So unfortunately, the kind of attention that has been given to Syria and to Iraq is not the same kind of measures of support that we've seen in trying to get rid of terrorism on African soil.
Yeah, while speaking at the UN Summit on Counterterrorism, one of the major points that Antonio Guterres raised is to urge the international community to do more to support military efforts to stop violent extremism. But what about Africa itself? Isn't it possible to have a functioning continental force that can adequately tackle security issues?
It is possible. We've seen that with ECOWAS in terms of what they have done within the West African region, and we have also seen, whichever way you want to look at it, in terms of the work that have been done, excellent work done by the African force in terms of fighting in Somalia and some other places where there have been crises. I think part of the challenge is the political will for these countries to come together and actually not being played against each other. Just like I mentioned earlier with regard to the G5 Sahel, we noticed that even Algeria was the first to actually oppose some of the work that these organizations that was meant to be a security unit coming together wanted to undertake. So the internal competition within Africa itself is part of their biggest challenge. But I'm confident that if Africans decide to deal with African issues, they would have a much better headway. Of course, they will need funding and support of the international organizations, but they can't do it if the political will is there.
Mr. Olodo, let's talk about the UN Counterterrorism Summit now that's holding in Kenya. What are your expectations from this meeting, and do the participating countries have the will to implement whatever decisions are made at the end?
I think part of the biggest challenge that we have in Africa at the moment is not the lack of numerous summits that is being held. I think it's more with regard to the implementation and cooperative working between the different countries to secure their borders and to understand who is moving within their borders and actually implementing some of the policies that are coming out from there. So part of the challenge is with the policymakers, taking away the action plans from those from this kind of an event and embedding it within their respective countries, localize it to be able to deliver on it, and to be accountable, to their citizens in terms of what they have done. It's not about the limousines and the different cars that will be, lining up, one after the other at that event, but more about what they could do for their people. And regardless of how many conferences you have, if you do not have a matching strategic plan to deal with the issue of violence extremism that is evolving in Africa, you will not be able to find a solution to the challenge.
All right, then, security expert Temitope Olodo, it's been interesting getting your thoughts on that issue. Thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
And thank you very much for having me.
Meanwhile, the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children in Armed Conflicts has traveled to Mopti, Mali, to discuss issues related to children affected by conflicts with local stakeholders. Virginia Gamba was accompanied by the Deputy Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General in Mali and Interim MINUSTAH Chief of Staff Joanne Adamson and the UNICEF President Representative in Mali, Lucia Elmi. The UN officials met children affected by conflicts, including boys and girls formerly associated with armed groups and reintegrated into the communities.
I'm here in Mopti because we have been very worried about the rise in violence against children, particularly through intercommunal violence. We also have spoken with the governor of the chef de cabinet of the governor, and we wanted to see the effects of the newly agreed consensus between the two sides that are fighting to see how to prevent violence against children. And we will remain seized of this. I have also wanted to hear directly from the children affected by violence in this region what they think about violence, how they would like to get out of it, and what are the thoughts about the reintegration that they need to have. So on the whole, we're worried, but we're hopeful that with the right measures and hearing what the children want, we might be able to stop and prevent violations against children.
The new United Nations envoy to Somalia, James Swan, has reaffirmed the world body's support for development programs and inclusive dialogue between the federal government of Somalia and federal member states. Mr. Swan visited the capital of Puntland, a federal member state in the country's northeast, to meet with President Said Abdullahi Mohamed Deni and hold discussions on key UN programs and activities. The UN is widely engaged in numerous activities in Puntland, ranging from emergency humanitarian assistance to medium and long-term development projects.
I'm pleased to have visited Puntland and engaged in a very constructive meeting with President Said Abdullahi Mohamed Deni, along with members of his cabinet. After spending my first 2 weeks in Mogadishu, where I have had excellent initial contact with the federal government of Somalia leadership, this is my first visit as Special Representative of the Secretary General, my first visit to a federal member state. We're looking forward to working with the people of Puntland and the federal member state administration in order to implement the UNSOM mandate and the programs of UN agencies more effectively. And this includes our efforts to support inclusive dialogue among the federal government of Somalia and the federal member states.
In South Africa, the country's most prominent anti-corruption crusader, the public protector, is herself facing allegations of corruption. Senior government officials have accused Busisi Wimakwe Bain of abusing her office to wage a dirty political campaign designed to favor corrupt elites. They say she has attacked honest politicians and sought to pave the way for corrupt forces to seize power in the country. This week, a prominent minister, Pravin Gordhan, has gone to court to challenge yet another controversial report by the public protector. He described her report as biased and unlawful and accused her of targeting him as part of a plot to return South Africa to the dark path of lawlessness. Mrs. Makwe-Bain denies the allegations. Still in South Africa, a truck carrying a gas tanker has exploded in Worcester, a town 112 kilometers north of Cape Town, injuring 6 people, including firefighters. According to local reports, the truck driver reversed into a lamppost and the crash sparked the fire. The Western Cape Traffic Chief, Kenny Africa, says that the cause of the explosion has not been confirmed and that police are investigating the matter. For more on what's happening in South Africa, our correspondent Becky Malley joins us live on the program. Becky, first, let's start with the gas explosion. What more can you tell us about that?
Oh, good afternoon. The gas explosion, up to now, it was a freak incident because, it was felt like the shake on the ground was felt by people kilometers away. And, by now, as you have known that, injured. The people who were seriously injured were the one person who was really close to the truck, who was still in ICU, and then the other 5 people, including the 2 firefighters. But otherwise, it was quite a freaky accident because we got traffic lights melting. It was quite a shock in the town, and there were a few buildings burned down. So that is as far as the report say. But, the only one fatality that the seriously injured, but is the one in ICU. Otherwise, we didn't hear about 4 people who got serious injuries.
Well, Becky, what about the driver of the truck? Is he likely to face any sanctions for this accident?
Well, having a special license for driving dangerous goods comes with a lot of regulations. So, well, according to the regulations, if you have violated a few rules, they can suspend your license. But then they need to investigate first and see if it was negligence or it was just an accident. So after the investigation, then the fate of the driver can be decided.
Becky, if you can hear me. If you can hear me, how common are these kinds of explosions in South Africa, and what are the authorities doing to combat this?
Well, this is honestly an isolated accident. We don't really see frequently such incidents happening because, the dangerous goods transportation is very much regulated because it involves a lot of people. And it's very dangerous for people on the road, for anyone involved, even for the drivers. So it's highly regulated, and the authorities have always kept, a cap on that. So I think on that department, I think the government or the authorities have made the point that in order for you to get such a license, all your papers need to be in order, and you have to have a certain number of years driving experience. So I think authorities have handled that. That is why we don't get much incident.
We do apologize for the poor audio quality. Our correspondent in South Africa, Becky Malley, speaking there. Well, still to come on the program. Egypt opens new international airport for a trial 1-month period. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.